Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, September 27th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ada Ferrer, professor of history in Latin American and Caribbean studies at New York University, author of Cuba, an American History. Also on the program today, tonight, the Senate will attempt to fund the government and lift the debt ceiling, and Republicans will obstruct it. And then what happens, we'll see. Meanwhile, corporate Dems fail to force the vote today. Progressives' threat to vote against the tiny infrastructure bill will delay its vote. More on that in a moment. Meanwhile, CDC report consistent with new studies, masking helps. In pediatric cases in schools with no mask wearing, they rose faster. U.S. claims enough vaccines to give boosters and to kids ages 5 to 11, the latter of which may come within just a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, a federal judge delays the vaccine mandate for New York City teachers, and New York State may see a hospital worker shortage because of vaccine mandates. Former CIA chief Mike Pompeo apparently contemplated both kidnapping and assassinating Julian Assange back in 2017, ostensibly because of the Vault 7 leaks that WikiLeaks published. German election results are in. Leaves a weakened center-right party of Angela Merkel, but not necessarily a more powerful center-left. Meanwhile, Joe Biden looking to run a migrant detention facility at Guantanamo Bay. New York Times report rise in poison control center calls regarding ivermectin. Meanwhile, 2 New Mexico deaths attributed to patients refusing anything but ivermectin to treat their COVID. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Monday, the beginning of what we're anticipating will be a bit of a crazy week when it comes to wheeling and dealing and lawmaking. And with me for the entire week, Emma Vigeland.
Yeah, I'm here.
And she's just trying to power through, folks.
No,
the Giants did not have a good weekend. And
I was at the game. I paid money to watch the Giants go 0-3, and I will admit that I cried in the parking lot for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 1 minute. But I'm not wearing blue in solidarity. I'm wearing it in mocking.
I understand.
In parody.
I understand. This is very difficult for you.
Actually, I love work today. This is what's wonderful. I can just talk to you, and we can talk about politics in order to take my mind off of that. Like, genuinely, there needs to be some sort of intervention that someone hosts with me.
No, it definitely feels like there needs to be an intervention.
Yeah, I'm having an issue.
The name Gottheimer, but in the Giants font.
Right. There you go.
I mean, that's going to be in my nightmare tonight, but thank you. Thank you for the image.
Let's talk about this, because there's an interesting thing that's going on right now. Obviously, tonight we have the Senate is going to be voting on the continuing resolution to fund the government for 3 months and a lifting of the debt ceiling. Mitch McConnell has vowed to block this by filibustering. The debt ceiling, of course, could cause the first default in the history of the United States. There is a plan B. The plan B is to later in the week, just hours before the government is to stop running, that would be the government funding bill, would be to bring up a clean version of that bill, just the government funding, dare the Republicans to vote that down. They more likely will not. Nobody likes to be blamed for a government shutdown. And they will move the debt ceiling into the reconciliation bill. Now, the interesting thing about that is that makes it a little bit harder to vote for against the reconciliation when that comes up. And so arguably, it gives a little bit more opportunity for the progressives to leverage it. However, on that side, something else is happening. So about several weeks ago, 9 corporate Democrats in the House insisted with that Nancy Pelosi bring up a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is the tiny one. On this day, Monday, September 27th. That will not happen today because Pramila Jayapal, the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, says that she has almost 60 votes to vote against it. Pelosi has pushed it to Thursday. Meanwhile, how do you get progressives to vote for that? There's talk that she may bring up some type of reconciliation framework bill, or maybe they can get enough public vows of support from some of those corporate Democrats. Here is Josh Gottheimer, one of those who has been pining away for a reduction on the salt tax deductions cap on Jake Tapper's show.
That's why I know we have to get it done, and we will. And we also have to get reconciliation done, and that's also going to get done.
Well, you know the answer to the question. The reason that it's not going to be voted on tomorrow is because House progressives are worried that more moderate Democrats such as you or more conservative Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin will kill the reconciliation deal, the Build Back Better Act, if they don't make sure that it's a quid pro quo. They will vote for infrastructure as long as you vote for reconciliation. Let me just ask you, though. Well, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just want to be clear about that. I support reconciliation. So do my colleagues. We meet all the time, and let me tell you, we all agree that we need a reconciliation package, and I think that's important for everyone to understand. But that doesn't mean these are two separate bills, right? You've got infrastructure and historic once in a century. There's no reason why we shouldn't pass that right away and get those shovels in the ground and make sure we can do everything we can to stop derailments and invest in our infrastructure and climate and make sure we fight climate change. And then also we should keep working on this separate bill on reconciliation, which I'm committed to passing, and
right.
Like Pramila said, we're talking all the time to make sure we can get that done as well.
Yeah.
The agreement was that they were going to be passed together, and he knows that. But he supports reconciliation in theory, right? Like
reconciliation bill.
Reconciliation bill. Just like the concept of reconciliation. I'm totally cool with that, man.
Well, yes, there will be a reconciliation bill that is going to be passed. The question is exactly what is going to be inside it. And yes, this guy also knows that that was the deal. The deal was pass them at the same time. Period. End of story. That was the deal. And he's also a liar in terms of everything else he was saying regarding his support for climate change legislation.
Which is in the bigger reconciliation package, the more comprehensive ones, although Manchin's taking a hack at that as well.
But here is the rub. We saw Axios reported that, and it's unclear to me how they articulated this, Representative Vincent Gonzalez from Texas and Fileman Vila from Texas. Excuse me.
It's okay.
It chokes me up a little bit to talk about this.
Well, it gives me an opportunity to say Gottheimer on the Problem Solvers Caucus, more like the Problem Creators Caucus.
Indeed. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
They said they support the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. So they were specific with the number. But the bottom line is, and it doesn't matter, Gottheimer, Case from Hawaii, Kurt Schrader, Jared Golden, Carolyn Bordeaux, they can all, and there's a couple others, say they're for the reconciliation bill. But the problem is this. If you pass in the House the bipartisan bill without passing a specific reconciliation bill, then you are giving license to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to hack away at it, to take out everything
to
they
keep
don't
working
like.
at it, as
exactly.
Congress said.
So the reconciliation bill needs to be a bill. It needs to exist before the progressives, and there's some non-progressive caucus members too, because everyone understands the value of this.
Because Biden himself understands the value of this. This is the president's agenda, which is like normally what these kinds of moderate lawmakers are supposed to be on board for. But they see value in doing this for, like, Gottheimer specifically, the SALT deduction. He wants to represent his wealthy constituents in his district, and that's the exact reason he's holding up the entire Biden agenda. Sinema has her own option, or her own incentives as well. I mean, now she's saying she doesn't support raising the top marginal tax rate and repealing the Trump tax cuts. That's how conservative this woman is at this point. They all have their own separate kind of trade groups and industry groups that they're appealing to.
The bottom line is they are going to have to hold the line in the House and vote on no bipartisan bill until the Senate is done with their reconciliation bill, because that is where the leverage comes from. It doesn't matter you pass a reconciliation bill if it only has $800 billion worth of funding. You have missed the opportunity. And if the debt ceiling is going to be in that reconciliation bill, the pressure then starts going to Kristen Sinema and to Joe Manchin, because then they're in a position of tanking essentially the world economy.
They don't look like the reasonable deal makers if they are responsible for shutting down the government.
Well, this isn't shutting down the government. This is the debt ceiling. This is about not the U.S. government, for the first time in its history, not meeting its obligations, its debt obligations. And now that can play out well into October. And I think we should have the progressives force that situation. We do have a deadline, and that deadline now is going to be the debt ceiling for reconciliation, and progressives should keep an eye on that. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Ada Ferrer. She is a professor of history and Latin American and Caribbean studies at New York University, author of Cuba, An American History. We'll be right back after this.
Which one is it? Caribbean or Caribbean? Caribbean or Caribbean?
Caribbean? Yep. Okay. Folks, speaking of which, well, I guess this really isn't speaking of this. We do have cooler weather that's coming in. Mm-hmm. We're not in the Caribbean or the Caribbean. So you don't think too much maybe of dehydration or signs of overheating or perspiration. Well, it also is that time where maybe you might start to have Christmas holiday parties, or just to gets to be fall, I'm going to start drinking a little more. Maybe that's I don't know if that happens. Look, the bottom line is liquid IV. I tried to segue into it. Didn't
I'll
go
say
smooth.
I was in very hot weather yesterday, hotter than expected at the Giants game. Got a weird sunburn. As soon as I came back, liquid IV, had a beer or two, and it was hot.
I should have just started with my week too.
Yeah. Right.
Because on Thursday, I had an esophagram, which is an unpleasant experience. It involves drinking barium.
Oof.
I'm fine. But they were like, don't get dehydrated. Make sure that you drink a lot of water. Maybe you want to get, like some type of electrolyte drink. And I said, I'm covered. Believe me. I've got so much liquid IV. I've got it in my backpack. I've got it at my home. I've got it at work. I'm covered. And, of course, every day for work, 1 stick of liquid IV, 16 ounces of water, hydrates you faster and more efficiently than water alone. Plus, liquid IV tastes great with flavors like watermelon, which I am featuring today.
That's a good one.
Strawberry, lemon, lime. I've had others, pina colada, the matcha with the energy. If you're enjoying a few extra drinks, maybe you're doing a little air travel, you're feeling a little sick, you want to stay hydrated, don't want to get the flu or whatever it is. Liquid IV contains 5 essential vitamins, more vitamin C than an orange, and as much potassium as a banana. They also have the immunity support tangerine flavor, which I love.
Oh, nice.
It's healthier than sugary sports drinks. No artificial flavors, no artificial preservatives, less sugar than an apple. The optimal ratio of glucose, sodium, and potassium delivers water and nutrients into the bloodstream. The company has donated over 4 million servings in response to COVID-19. Products are being donated to hospitals, first responders, food banks, and more. Check it out, folks. I read a piece in the Times the other day that maybe it's not the Times. To stay hydrated, it's not just about water. It is about those things like potassium and sodium. And that's why liquid IV is so efficient. Well, the Times didn't write about that, but that's what I've garnered. Grab your favorite liquid IV flavors nationwide at Walmart. You can get 25% off, though, when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MajorityRep at checkout. That's 25% off anything when you order and when you get better hydration today using promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Other sponsor of our program today, been sponsoring this show for quite some time, years, in fact. Maybe you're heading back to the office. Time to get that fresh, clean, all business look. That's the kind of look I like to have on Mondays. However, didn't do it this week. But generally, when I do, it's with Harry's. If you don't know Harry's, it's time you do. Harry's was created to be a different company from other shaving companies. Harry's crafts high-quality, long-lasting blades and durable weighted handles that make a close, comfortable shave quick and enjoyable. Since Harry's insisted you shouldn't have to choose between a great shave and a fair price, they just give you both. Refill blades start as low as $2. New Harry's customers get their starter set, which includes a 5-blade razor, a weighted handle, foaming shave gel with aloe, and a travel cover. That's a $13 value, and you get it for $3.
Wow.
Harry's also offers a wide range of amazing face and body care products for men, all delivered right to your door. Body wash is excellent. I use the shave gel as well, but for me, ultimately, it is the razor. I like the simple design of their handles. I like the narrowness of their blade head. For my asymmetrical nostrils. Harry's has been great to me. And, I'm not a big shaver, but when I do, it's with Harry's. That would be a weird pitch for them, but I don't know.
Well, all right.
There's never been a better time to try Harry's. Go to harrys.com/majority to get their starter set for just $3. It's 100% satisfaction guaranteed. So guess what? You got nothing to lose. Go to harrys.com/majority right now to get this special offer. That's Harrys, HARRYS, harrys.com/majority. Okay. Want to welcome to the program Ada Ferrer. She is a professor of history and Latin American and Caribbean studies at New York University and author of Cuba, an American History. I'm here with Emma Vigeland. And Ada, please, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Ferrer. That's fine.
Ferrer.
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies, but thank you for joining us. And I have to say also, in addition to your book being a really very comprehensive history of Cuba and Cuba's relationship to America, and has told the experience of the people. Your piece about your brother in the New York, I found to be really just heartbreaking and and fascinating. So thank you for that. And maybe we will talk a little bit about that in a moment. But let's start with why an American history?
Yeah, the book could have been perhaps just Cuba, a history, but I decided that sounded kind of flat. And also, the history of the two countries are so intertwined that any history of Cuba is also necessarily an American history, because the US has played such an outsized role in the history of the country. I also feel really deeply that it's and maybe this partly comes out of personal experience, but also out of intellectual and political commitment, that I think it's good for people and nations and nations to see themselves sometimes from the outside in. The US acts on the world in many places. It's useful, I think, for Americans to get a perspective on the US that comes from those other places where the US has played such a role. So I call it a history of Cuba that also serves as a kind of shadow history of the US. It's not a full history of the US, it's selective, but it does also reveal something essential about US history as much as Cuban history.
And to that end, I was really fascinated, and I was not sort of aware of this dynamic, although it makes, once you understand this, it makes a total sense. But that it feels like from what you've written, and maybe we can go back a little bit earlier than this, but that Cuba's trajectory was dramatically impacted by the Haitian independent revolution, and you know, which in and of itself, the Haitian Revolution was obviously a hugely, I think, you know, it was a massive piece of sort of moment in history that also impacted the trajectory of that country, particularly in the context of its relationship with the United States. But talk about the interplay of those three countries at that moment.
Yeah, well, the Haitian Revolution occurred in what was then the wealthiest colony in the world, French Saint-Domingue. So the wealthiest, of course, for the people who held it as a colony and for the people who own land there. So there, the enslaved people rose up and eventually eliminated slavery and declared independence from Spain. Cuba is physically very close to Haiti. And because sugar planters in the French colony were so wealthy and so powerful, Cuban planters always wanted to be like them. And so when the Haitian Revolution, you know, introduced all this turmoil in the colony and sugar production dropped, Cuban planters said, this is our chance. The hour of our happiness has arrived. And it's in that moment and in response to those events that sugar and slavery and the slave trade take off in Cuba in a definitive way. And it's going to mark the rest of the 19th century in Cuba. And some of the patterns would persist much longer to the era of Fidel Castro. In terms of the US famously acquired you know, something like a third of its landmass when Napoleon decided to sell part of France's territory in North America, and he did that partly to recover funds to fight in the Haitian Revolution. So the Haitian Revolution had an enormous impact in the U.S. in terms of just territorial expansion, and Cuba likewise held enormous appeal for early American statesmen like Jefferson and Adams and Madison, who really saw the U.S. as becoming a larger country, a more powerful country, and they wanted to acquire Cuba because they thought, you know, there's all these quotes from these 19th century founding fathers about how the U.S. could not reach its full potential until it acquired Cuba. And I think Americans are just surprised to hear that. Why would Cuba have been so important in the 19th century that they felt the need to acquire it? And I mean, I can expand on that if
please.
Yeah. So I think a part of it was commercial, that Cuba is located in this very important geographic spot that sits at the intersection of the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. And if you look at a map, Cuba is kind of below where the port of New Orleans sits on the Gulf of Mexico. So Jefferson and others were worried that anyone who controlled Cuba had the right to block American commerce, that they could blockade ships coming out of New Orleans and headed to Europe, to North America, to South America. And so acquiring Cuba was a way for them to protect their commerce. And, again, you think of New Orleans, it was a major port in the 19th century. All the food grown, the wheat, the corn, everything else in the Mississippi Valley went out through that port, and right near where Havana stood. So they saw the acquisition of Cuba as very important commercially. They saw it as a way to expand American power internationally. And also, increasingly, the US was invested and implicated in Cuban slavery. And they were worried that if Britain somehow acquired Cuba, Britain was by then against the slave trade. It had abolitionism there was very powerful. So they were worried the British would come in to Cuba and the slave trade, eventually end slavery, and all these American investments in sugar, in slavery, in the slave trade, eventually in the railroad and other things would be threatened. So they attached a lot of importance to that connection with Cuba.
It's amazing to me how the entire, I guess, history of the United States' relationship with Cuba has just been defined by, is Cuba going to be a threat to capital or a threat to capitalism in general, of course, with the rise of Fidel Castro? The United States' response to that, I think, is indicative of this larger dynamic. I found it really interesting how you wrote about how the U.S. kind of seized on the opportunity at the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century to take credit for the Cuban Revolution. And they were successful in securing Cuba for their own interests for a small period of time. I wasn't aware of how opportunistic they were to that extent. I'm wondering if you could expand on that part of our history, because that was so fascinating to me.
Yeah. When we're in high school, maybe, I don't think we studied it in elementary school, we all kind of learn about Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders and the Spanish-American War and the explosion of the Maine and all that. And so that's an episode that Americans know as the Spanish-American War. U.S. declares war on Spain. They go to places, they go to Cuba, they go to Puerto Rico, they go to the Philippines, and in about 4 months, they defeat this old European power. And that vision of history ignores this really important, fascinating period, which is the wars of independence in Cuba, which had begun 30 years earlier. So ostensibly, the US intervenes in 1898 against Spain to help Cuba achieve its independence. But Cuba had been fighting for that independence and mobilizing and advocating for it for 30 years. They had, the movement had created a multiracial army that was profoundly popular and that eroded social distinctions to a great extent. It championed a vision of racial equality that was startling for the fact that it emerged out of a slave society. And some of the leaders, principally Jose Marti, who was killed in the war, also saw Cuban independence as a check on American expansion. So you have all this going on for over 30 years. It's the third year of the war in 1898. Things are kind of at a stalemate. Spain is able to hold the cities, but it can't assert itself in the countryside. And the Cuban rebels, the independence fighters, really believe that independence is within reach and that they can win it before the end of the year. And it's at that moment that the Maine explodes and the US comes in. So the way that moment is remembered and narrated after the fact in the US is as the US acting benevolently to help a neighbor achieve independence. And in that vision, independence, Cuban independence, is seen as a kind of gift of the US to the Cubans. But in Cuba, it's seen radically differently. And that is that Cubans had been fighting already for 30 years. They had almost won. And the US intervened and then used that intervention to establish a longstanding power. So they occupied the country militarily for 4 years until 1902. The highest official in the land was an American governor. They wrote the budgets, appointed people, et cetera, et cetera. And then they left eventually on May 20th, 1902, but they had a condition. The US had a condition for its departure, and that was that the Cubans accept something called the Platt Amendment.
Oop, the Platt Amendment.
We have we're frozen. Bradley, can we get
basically?
Oh, I'm sorry, Professor. I'm sorry. We froze just as we were getting to the Platt Amendment.
Okay.
But before we actually, which was fortuitous, because before we get to the Platt Amendment, I want to go backwards here a little bit because I want to get a sense of what happened during the 19th century when we have the Haitian Revolution happens. There's an opportunity, at least from a business standpoint, of, I guess, sort of capitalists and slave owners in Cuba to sort of take advantage of this business opportunity, since a big supplier of both sugar and slaves.
Right.
What becomes the United States perspective? Like, I mean, how do you go from, like, in the early 1900s well into deep into the 19th century, when Jose Marti, and who is considered to be more or less a founding father of Cuba, what is that development there, and how much U.S. influence is there? What gets built up that it takes 30 years? You know, is it just simply what are the forces that Marti is fighting against throughout that, and when does that fight begin during the 19th century?
Yeah.
How much of it is the United States, saying, like, we can't have another Haiti here, right, because this is going to send the wrong message. At least, for the first half of the 19th century, this is going to send the wrong message to our slaves. And we need the sugar.
Right. Yeah. Well, the U.S. and they said this, American officials said this explicitly: Cuba cannot be independent because it will become it will become a Black Republic, another Haiti. We'll lose our investments in all these things. But what they thought was, so they thought about purchasing it. Sometimes they thought about whether it was worth going to war for, but their decision for a lot of the 19th century was that as long as Spain was a relatively weak power compared to Britain, say, or France, or even the US, as long as Spain was a weak power, the US could live with that because it could keep developing its interests there. Spain was eager to retain Cuba, so it gave Cubans the right to trade with the US. So the system more or less worked for the US. Increasingly, especially after the 1840s, after the US has, after Florida has been acquired, after Texas has been acquired, many people believe that Cuba is the next logical step. And that is all about slavery. So propertied white Southerners saw the acquisition of Cuba as a way to protect slavery in the US. So the idea was that they would incorporate Cuba to the US, annex it was called, so it was US annexation, and they would convert the island into perhaps 3 slave states, which would greatly increase the power of the South in Washington, D.C. So that was the vision. They were what was called filibustering expeditions that left out of places like New Orleans to try to wrest Cuba away from Spain and then attach it immediately to the U.S. So that was kind of the mood and the consensus among the most powerful Americans in 1840s, 1850s. And, even on the eve of the Civil War, you had the slave trade as a booming business, even in New York City, where ships were leaving New York City, going to the west coast of Africa, and then selling their cargo in Cuba. But after the Civil War happened, then that position lost a lot of power, because what was the point? Once slavery no longer existed in the US, what was the point of acquiring Cuba? In that moment, they would have to liberate the slave forces in Cuba. So annexationism kind of declined in that moment. And that's when you have the rise of the Cuban independence movement, of people like Jose Marti or the Afro-Cuban general Antonio Maceo. Marti always saw the struggle as one that was against Spain, but he used to say that there were people who preferred that Cuba never be Cuban, that it be Spanish, that it be American, and not Cuban. So he said in one of the last letters he ever wrote that he saw the challenge of that moment being, he thought that the greatest need was to avoid that Cuba, on becoming independent, would allow the US to kind of spread its wings over Cuba and then into the rest of Latin America. So he always saw Cuban sovereignty, which was always his goal, as something that had to be won from Spain and protected from the US.
And he was 100% right.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
He was exactly right. I mean, that takes us up to the Platt Amendment in 1901, which is really an amazing piece of legislation because Cuba is not America, a United States, I should say, at that point. But somehow the U.S. Congress felt like we can legislate this. I mean, tell us about the Platt Amendment, and clearly, I don't know. I guess I don't know how apocryphal the whole the story about the Maine is as to whether what caused its sinking, or Randolph Hearst saying I'll get you your war type of situation. But clearly, the United States was waiting for two sides to fight it out, and then basically to step in, and at the very least, how that control exerted itself. They weren't quite sure, but they clearly were going to control this situation when there's only one person standing.
Right. Absolutely. So the Platt Amendment was, written in Washington. And it's interesting, when the U.S. first intervened, part of the reason that Congress voted for that war and that intervention in 1898 was because of something called the Teller Amendment, which recognized that Cuba was free and sovereign, and that the U.S. was going in only so long, just to protect that Cuban sovereignty momentarily. And once everything was pacified, they would leave. The thing is, the benchmark kept changing. So then Cuba was pacified actually fairly quickly. And so the Cubans said, okay, it's time for you to leave. And they're like, no, you have to prove yourself capable of self-government before we leave. And that became the new benchmark. So there were elections, and all the elections were peaceful, but the people who were elected were the most pro-independence types, not the kinds the Cubans wanted. So when they proved themselves capable of self-government, it changed yet again. And that's when the US, Platt and the War Secretary, Root, et cetera, basically said that the ultimate proof of Cubans' ability to govern themselves was to accept the Platt Amendment as an appendix to their new constitution. And, so the Constitutional Assembly met, they talked about it, they voted against it once, they voted against it twice, but they realized that the Americans would never leave unless they approved it. And so that's what happened. Now, what is the Platt Amendment? Well, it basically gives the US the right to intervene militarily in Cuba without being invited in. The US could determine when life, liberty, and property were in danger in Cuba, and then it could decide to intervene. It did other things as well. So it limited the ability of the Cuban government to incur foreign debt. It limited the ability of the Cuban government to sign treaties with countries, other than the US. It also earmarked land for the development of naval stations, and that's the origin of what
we have. Another. All right, we will. Hopefully, she'll be back. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor. I'm sorry, we lost you again.
Yeah,
right?
I don't. Yeah, I have I'm wired into the connection. I don't know why it's doing that, but
it could be a Zoom thing. But you were saying that we had you just at the moment where the idea that they could intervene, and that this was the going forward, that the U.S. had these sort of ability to dictate whether Cuba had loans from other countries, ostensibly to develop themselves. I mean, this is the United States basically saying, like, we'll control the pace of development. We'll control the freedoms that you have in the country. This is the United States wresting full control from the Cuban people. Professor?
Yeah, you froze for me, but I'm back.
You're back. Yes.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, and Leonard Wood, who was the U.S. governor, said Cuba has no real sovereignty under the Platt Amendment. It was just a stated fact, and that's what.
Okay, we have just a little more technical difficulty. Bear with us, folks. Maybe we'll have her reconnect.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go. I think maybe the best thing, if you just switch off and then reconnect.
Leave the meeting and then come back?
Yes, that'd be great. And Bradley, will you hit the timer for us? And we will bear with us, folks. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty, and we should have it resolved in a moment. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so we'll try this again, and so you were saying, though, this is the United States exerting just about every bit of operational control over Cuba as you would want if you were concerned about maintaining sort of hegemony over Cuba, right? Like you could do what you want in the house, but I control your credit card and I own the car, and you wanna...
a conservatorship, if you will, which has been in the news a bit recently.
Yeah, and and this the naval base has created Guantanamo Bay, and this becomes the new sort of like new normal for Cuba. What develops as a function of that? Okay. Maybe we should try it without camera.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's freezing again. What if I just restart my computer? Can we do that?
Yes, we can. We'll take a quick break.
Okay.
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 All right. We're going to take a quick break. Cut the break. Just let us know what you do. Okay, so we're back, and apologies, folks. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are now recounting the history of Cuba, and we are somewhere around the beginning of the 20th century, and there has been an amendment to the Cuban, I guess, charter or constitution that has come from the United States. It is named after a senator from Connecticut, which is not part of Cuba. And the Platt Amendment basically says that Cuba has sovereignty, but not over the primary functions that a government would need to really develop and to strike out in the world as an independent country. So what then happens over the course of the next, 40, 50 years in terms of Americans, in terms of America, but also just in terms of Cuba and the way that it develops?
Yeah, well, that's a long period to cover, but one thing that happens repeatedly is that the U.S. intervenes. So there are other military interventions. There's a full-scale occupation, 1906 to 1909. There's others in the decades that follow. What the Platt Amendment means in terms of Cuban politics is that it's hard for a really independent domestic politics to take shape, because leaders have to take into account what the US government is going to think of X or Y. It also means that when you have competing parties in Cuba, that one of them, let's say there's an election, a contested election. If the party that's out creates enough trouble and creates the semblance of chaos, that could get the US to intervene to put the winning party out of power. So it's hard to have a truly functional sovereign politics under the Platt Amendment. So that's something that is unfolding in the political sphere. You have American ambassadors who are exerting, incredible control over domestic policies. One famous, really hated one, Enoch Crowder, for example, would appoint the cabinet, or not appoint, but he would tell the president who to appoint in his cabinet, and so on and so forth. So that's going on politically. Economically, the US is acquiring more and more property. And by the 1920s, the US controls about 2/3 of the Cuban sugar industry. The sugar industry is the backbone of the Cuban economy. It's their main export. Most of it is owned or controlled by US corporations and US banks. So that means that any profits from Cuba's primary industry are going overwhelmingly to American companies and individuals. So that's happening economically. Culturally, you have more and more ties between the two countries. You have more American tourists traveling to Cuba, particularly with prohibition in the US. They can't drink in the US, so they start going to Cuba to have rum and beer and all kinds of things, and to dance and gamble, which also becomes legal in Cuba and is not in the US. So you have that kind of connection develop. But really, I just want to say one more thing. It's really important because there's a way in which you can talk about Cuba as this kind of playground of the US, say, and people talk about this in relation to the mafia, for instance. But it's important to note that Cuba has this, a vibrant political and intellectual scene that, as the US is exerting control, there are Cubans who are mobilizing against it. They're writing against it. They're creating parties and independent associations to combat it. So there's, and we can't lose sight of that. Cuba is more than what the US makes or doesn't make of it.
There's a paradox here because there's no stifling of dissent within the country until it achieves a level that would ultimately perhaps threaten U.S. interest particularly in the sugar trade at that point. And so, and just to be clear, the U.S. sort of interest in Cuba at that becomes it feels to me like more exclusively about resources than it does sort of the military perspective of needing a beachhead to protect, let's say, New Orleans by the time we get into Although, that's going to change at one point when, 20 or 30 years ahead. And so increasingly, the U.S. also, I would imagine, begins to support the idea of, more or less a dictator in Cuba, because that's the best way to ensure that the deal that we have is secure, right? We don't have to worry about the vagaries of a potential democracy, inhibiting our sugar interests.
Well, that's a really interesting and important question, and it comes to a head in the late 20s and early 30s when you have this president of Cuba, Gerardo Machado, who's originally elected as a reformist candidate. He doesn't want to leave office, and he gets increasingly repressive and brutal with the opposition, and the U.S. supports him. Until the very end, when they realize he can't maintain control. But if you look at that period of, beginning in the mid-20s, excuse me, historians sometimes call a nationalist awakening in Cuba, because you have all these intellectuals, students. Students are an incredibly important political force in Cuba. Lawyers, feminists, activists, Black veterans. They're organizing, they're critiquing this and the dictator. You have sugar workers on strike. You have massive strikes across the island in the 30s, and you get a revolution against Machado that defeats the dictator. And it's at that point, after that revolution, that the Platt Amendment is abrogated. It's much more complicated than that. We can go into it more if you want, but yeah, what you saw in that example is that the U.S. was willing to abide by Machado's dictatorial policies until it became clear that Machado could not maintain the peace, that the sugar estates were burning, that the workers were constantly on strike. And at that point, the U.S. could see clear to not supporting Machado anymore.
Right. You don't want to be on the losing side if you're, so it feels like that story plays out over and over again. I mean, it's not, that dynamic's not terribly different than Martí's independence from Spain, and then from Machado, and then we go into a period where, I guess the United States is just sort of like hoping and betting and probably prodding, and then ultimately takes us up to Batista. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but not too much. And Batista comes in as presumably comes in as a democratically elected president, but that evolves into a dictatorship as well. And when it becomes clear that Castro has led a revolution for a couple of years that is successful, the United States sort of takes a similar tact. Like, well, yeah, we were sort of always for this anyway.
Yeah.
So at some level.
Yeah. I mean, Batista's a fascinating character. And, Americans, if they know about him at all, they know about him as the man deposed by Fidel Castro. But he'd been an important, more than a figurehead. He'd been the man in Cuban politics since that revolution in the 30s. So he was involved in that revolution. But when that revolution became too progressive, it nationalized some American properties. It always sided with the workers. Batista was head of the army, and the U.S. ambassador worked with Batista to undo that revolution. And that's the rise of Batista is directly linked to the U.S. role in Cuba. So Batista becomes he doesn't become president at that point. He's head of the army, and he's the man behind the scenes, making sure that that progressive part of the revolution is quashed. Then he is elected democratically in 1940. His successor, there's no re-election at that point. His successor is defeated. His presumed, the person in his party who he presumed would be his successor was defeated at the polls, and then Batista is running for election in 1952. He's running third. He's going to lose, and basically he stages a military coup that gets rid of the government, suspends the Constitution, which at that point is a new Constitution from 1940 that did not have the Platt Amendment in it. So it's at that point in 52 that he takes power as the leader of this coup and this dictator.
And so we can see, you know, over the course of a history of at this point, I guess, you know, over 100 years of the United States inhibiting the growth of a culture of, you know, or at least I guess the sort of like, because clearly a culture of democracy there, and a culture of, you know, I don't know that it was necessarily named as socialism, but of certainly of like, of equality and of communalism, and the United States sort of periodically stepping in to make sure that's not growing. And so the sort of what begins as sort of a populist revolt under Castro, it feels like there was some type of sort of inevitability to that. And it was really the United States just stepped back and waited to see where the chips were going to fall.
Yeah. So there is this important tradition in Cuba that is both socially progressive and anti-imperialist. So it wasn't necessarily communist. It wasn't always social, but you think of like a social democratic tradition, and it's what was most powerful, what you saw most powerfully in the 1940 Constitution that was written. It had all these social provisions, like, you know, the 8-hour workday, maternity leave, all these things that you associate with socially progressive causes was part of that Constitution. And it was also very anti-imperialist and pro-sovereignty. So there are important politicians in that vein, important thinkers, and Castro comes out of that tradition. So sometimes, you know, we think of Fidel Castro, this tall bearded guy in the mountains, as if he came from nowhere, but he's very much comes out of Cuban political traditions and history. And yeah, when, you know, the US supported Batista right until the very end, they withdraw military support a few months before he loses power. And they, after the revolution comes to power, they recognize the new government within days. I think it was less than a week or about a week where they officially recognize the new government. And then they just watch really carefully to see, you know, what's going to happen. And really, they don't know what to make of it. They don't know what to make of Fidel Castro. They don't know, you know, they keep, and it's fascinating to read the memos. They're like, is he communist? Is he not communist? And everyone is saying something different. He's not communist, he's anti-communist. And he's someone says he's like a volcano about to erupt, someone says. So, yeah. And
really the decision that he's faced with on some level is the devil you know, or maybe the devil you don't, in terms of if you were interested in Cuban sovereignty, you knew that the United States had, you know, at least a century's worth of examples of like not going to allow that to happen. And so the only other option there was the Soviet Union at that time.
At that time, yeah. So initially when Castro's asked about, you know, is he communist, is he socialist, he always says no. Some people say that was just strategic. He couldn't admit it at that point because the US would have attacked right away. But I do, I mean, there's a debate about this. When did he become communist and all that? We can, if you want, we could talk about that. But I think it's important that initially, publicly, he's constantly trying to find a middle path. And so he says, it's not, the only ism is humanism. This is a humanist revolution. It's not red, it's olive green, like the army uniform of his rebel army. We want, what would he say? We want bread without terror. Bread meaning, you know, we don't want the worst of communism. We don't want the worst of capitalism. We want bread without terror, justice, et cetera. So that's the language that is most powerful for a long time. And then the US starts to bandy about the communist charge more concertedly after May of 1959, which is when Castro, when the new government enacts an agrarian reform. But actually, it's a pretty moderate agrarian reform that they enacted. But, any agrarian reform that confiscates very large landholdings is going to necessarily confiscate some American landholdings because the US companies own so much there. And that's when you started to get communism, the charge of communism take off. And by November of 59, you have Eisenhower say, we can't work with him. We have to find a way to get another government in there. So it's pretty quick on the U.S. side. And then
Castro has one option if he genuinely is committed to a sovereign Cuba. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we're going to skip ahead. Folks should really read your book, and when we come back, we'll just talk about what we can anticipate now in a Cuba that is now led by someone who's not Castro for the first time in 60 some odd years. Yeah. We'll take a quick break after this. We on break? Okay, so we just got to, we'll come back and we'll wrap up relatively quickly. Yeah. Okay, we're back, and we're skipping ahead to over the years of Fidel Castro and his brother, I guess, also for a couple of years. We just had protests in Cuba. What is the situation in Cuba now in terms of the freedoms or lack thereof that people enjoy in some instances? There's a lot that we're skipping over in terms of like a lot of the gains in terms of literacy and medicine, and the ability of people to live in housing. There's also been a lot of political repression over these years as well. Where are we now, and where do you anticipate things going? I'm a historian, so I'm always going to take you back. There's no way to understand where we are now unless you understand the effects of the fall of the Soviet Union in Cuba. So basically, from the early 90s, you had this horrible economic crisis that just changed daily life in Cuba. And in some ways, the government dealt with that by increasing tourism and allowing foreign direct investment, things like that. But really, the country never recovered. And so we're 30 years into that. So the economic situation never recovered. It's worse now with the pandemic, which had a horrible effect in Cuba of late. And you have growing repression. The repression's been there almost from the start. And the new president, Diaz-Canel, has given no indication that he's going to let up. In fact, it's been the opposite. So he's put in new laws, really limiting artistic expression. Artists can't exhibit or perform unless they have express approval from the government. Some young artists have called for negotiation. Some cultural figures wanted to do that. The president said, nope, no negotiation. They're all terrorists. And then we saw it after the protests, which were unprecedented. They occurred all over the island, more than 50 locations, many young people, many Black Cubans, many artists, and so on. And the president went on TV and basically said, they're all terrorists, they're paid for by the US. And he sent people out to crush them and beat them and arrest them. So the political situation is terrible. And I really think that a majority, Cubans are 30 years more tired of economic crisis. They're 30 years more tired of being told to wait and of having to sacrifice. And I think the new president does not have the historic relationship to the country or the people that the Castros did. And the majority of people don't trust him to know how to overcome the deep crisis of the present. It's fascinating stuff. I wish we had even more time, and perhaps we'll have you back for to cover those years and to get a sense of where we're going, the special period as they call it, after the fall of the Soviet Union, and the military, the economic deprivation, and of course it's enhanced by the embargo from the United States.
Right, absolutely.
Significantly, but the book is Cuba: An American History. Ada Ferrer, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, if you're watching us on Peacock, we will say goodbye until tomorrow. And if you're still with us, we'll say hello, and we'll head into the fun half. I mean, it is really amazing. Just sort of like we could probably have a variation of that interview about Haiti. In many ways, it would be.
A lot of the patterns reproduce themselves.
Yeah. You know,
not one where we
Guatemala, Nicaragua. I mean, there's, some places it becomes more murderous, our involvement. But you talk about like the legacy of decisions that we made in this country and of our imperialism from 200 years ago. It's not a lot you have to do 200 years later if you do it right the first time, in terms of like making countries really inhibiting the development of self-governance.
It's the good neighbor policy.
Yeah, I mean, if you really, you only have to intervene a couple of times before you ensure that these countries, back in the day, if you do it enough, or whenever there's a inkling of some type of democratic control or impulse, if you do it enough, you can really screw up a country for decades to come.
Right.
So, congratulations to us. Congratulations to us. I would also argue probably that there's that to the extent that you can do that with like sort of the culture of democracy, you probably also can do that with sort of cohorts of people, like the implications of slavery in the context of where you then also have like a series of rolling initiatives to continue to keep a lot of people as second-class citizens.
Yeah, and then you can just change the justification every time, right? It's communism. It's trying to stop a tyrant. It doesn't matter. You can You can just interchange them. Pick one of them out of a hat. Although they're not too creative with the imaginary boogeyman.
Well, you don't need.
I guess you can just
Well, I
play
think
the hits.
the hit was this guy is a threat to democracy, and by democracy there's a little asterisk that it says the interests of global capitalists.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
I've told this story before, but I worked on my then wife's. I guess she wasn't my wife at that time. Documentary that we shot in Cuba in 2002. And one of the subjects was one of Castro's photographers, who Castro understood that he was dealing with a country that was had a high illiteracy rate at that time before Castro came in. They have a very high literacy rate now. And so he wanted to tell the story of the revolution in pictures. And this one guy, Raul Corrales, who I believe has since passed, I would imagine he must have, traveled with Castro in his first trip to the United States to speak at the UN. And apparently Castro's CIA nickname or security nickname, Sugar One, gives you a sense of what the who he was to the United States. All right, folks, just a reminder, it is your support that allows this program to survive and thrive. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you support the free show, and then you get extra content almost every single day. jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget the AM Quickie. How do you sign up for it? You go to majority.fm, scroll down to the bottom, insert your email address into the insert your email address insertion place. You write it in there, and that's that. Also,
the insertion place.
As I mentioned the other day, our Discord has over 4,000 members now.
Wow.
It's a great place to go to discuss stuff on the show. It's a great place to go for resources. It's a great place to just talk with other people in the community. We lost somebody in that community over the weekend. EJ, who would post as Negan's cat. And she passed away. Apparently she was very, very supportive to a lot of people. And so I just wanted to offer our condolences to her family and friends. I'm
so sorry to hear that.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. So you can join that community by going to majority discord.com and join the folks over there. It really is, there's been people who have been following the show in one form or another over the past 15 years. And and over that time, we've lost people who were big commenters on the blog at the old Majority Report radio blog that we had back in the day and others. It really is a wonderful community of people, and real friendships are developed, and a lot of, not institutionalized, but mutual aid is offered to people. And so, you can be a part of that as well. Don't forget, you can check out Nomi Show, youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show. You can find that also on Twitch, twitch.tv/the_Nomi_Key_show. And Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
For patrons, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We had Dominique Remion at Canary Filmmaker, reproductive justice advocate. We talked about the Texas anti-abortion stuff, including not only SB 8, but SB 4, which is a bill to ban mail-in basically mail-in drugs by mail, which is interesting coming from a state where, Matthew McConaughey, who's been silent about all the abortion stuff, starred in a movie about crossing the border to get drugs that weren't available. So we talked about that, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also talk about Dominique's upcoming the film that she's working on. So check that out, folks.
All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up! Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vogeland.
What the fuck?
I hit Noma Key's name.
Yeah.
I nailed it today, and then like it
Emma
was just
Vogeland.
like all of my.
Is that your way of saying my commentary is pretty?
No,
today?
it's
Sam
my
only
way of
has-
saying like all my pronunciation energy went into the successful Noma Key.
Right.
If there was an
that's
MR
it.
video
Nothing's
game
left.
Sam would only have a certain number of pronunciation points every day.
Exactly.
Right,
I'm only
right.
awarded.
You've now died and have to
My
regenerate.
quiver is empty, and so I need to recharge.
I haven't heard quiver from you in a while.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Well, now we know that you're on your way back.
What is that? What is it? What would you say? Call that in a video game? Like
A life?
No,
It'd
like,
be your point bar. The
your point bar?
The pronunciation point bar.
Oh, okay.
Did you ever shoot a bow?
I do now a recurve.
Oh,
I mean, as a kid I did, but I shoot 45-pound recurve bow
Wait, when?
Very
when?
nice. Recurve's
Why? Where?
when I go upstate.
Recurve's
And sometimes you've got ranges here too in Brooklyn.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Do you do it as a part of LARPing?
I wear a garb like from
Robin Hood hat?
Robin Hood.
Right, right.
Like I'm in.
You wear a loincloth?
Yeah.
red felt one.
Yeah.
Green
I
felt.
do. It's true.
And a matching pointy hat.
That's right. And
And you have to prance. You can't run.
I make Saul dress up as Little John, and for my birthday, John Benjamin comes out as Friar Tuck, and then it's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm not a great shot. I used to be a better shot, but I'm pretty good. I got my point of aim down, and if I don't move around a lot, I can get pretty solid, red, yellow.
Oh. You don't hunt prey with it?
I do not hunt prey, although
Watch out, Steven Crowder.
I do have in the event. No, I do. If anything, like a squirrel gets hit wayward, I will. No, that doesn't happen. But I do. I will admit to having an unopened package of hunting heads, essentially for the arrows.
Oh.
In the event that I figure I have 6, and if there is some type of zombie apocalypse or COVID, the supply
The
chain.
zombie broadheads. They probably sell those actually.
you'd be a little bit bummed out to not at least have them they're in a drawer somewhere and that type of thing. But
yeah, that's did you guys ever see that movie We Need to Talk About Kevin?
It's a bleak movie.
Yeah, it's just, to me, I appreciated what it was trying to do. It's like a movie about Tilda Swinton's son is he's a psychopath essentially, and he ends up shooting up his school. But the movie didn't have the guts to have him do it with a gun, so he kills a bunch of people with a bow and arrow. And then I was like, You know what, movie? I kind of like the darkness you were going to, but I don't believe in America that a kid's going to shoot up a school with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, no, you rush him.
Right.
Yeah.
Came out in 2011. I feel like maybe if it came out now with more pointed school shooting commentary, they'd do the real thing and have him shoot up a school with a gun. But anyway.
Hey.
Okay.
Great. Fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Fun half. Democracy Now! Gamic interviewed Mansour Adyafi, detainee number 441 in Guantanamo. He was there for 14 years without charges, and he got there at 19 years old.
The Intercept interviewed him last month too.
Insane,
I think, or covered him.
Where was he from? Is he in Canada now? Is he that? I don't know his story specifically.
People should check out, if you're looking for some reading on this, Mohamedou Ould Slahi's Guantanamo Diary. It's insane.
Fear City. Emma has got to be the only person I've ever heard say she needs to talk about politics as a distraction from sports. I have a feeling Josh from Chicago won't be calling in today after Justin Fields' 68-yard performance.
It was 68 yards, but then he lost, I think, 67 yards on the sack, and they set a NFL record for having one total yard passing or something.
He
like
lost
that.
60 on one sack?
It might have been total. I was at the Giants game, so I wasn't able to watch, but I read that headline on Pro Football Talk.
Of course.
An NBC property.
Oliver Wendell Holmes Slice. The conversation on Friday had an interesting point about the lack of political hardball that's being played on this infrastructure and reconciliation bills by the Dems. I'm trying to envision a scenario where a notorious hard-nosed negotiator like LBJ would allow himself to be played by a preening hick from a state that is desperate for money and a junior varsity corporate pharma hack. It's begging to be primaried into early retirement. I just don't buy that there's no leverage here. So if this all fails, can the failure be squarely placed at Biden's feet for lack of bold leadership? The buck stops here, right? I completely agree with that assessment. I mean, I think Pelosi and Schumer will probably be deserved of some blame as well. But yes, and look, this is what's interesting about the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is going to go into the reconciliation bill. I don't know that it can have its own standalone. I think I keep reading different things. I keep reading that what they'll have to do for the reconciliation bill is to rewrite the original resolution that allowed for this reconciliation bill to include the rising of the debt ceiling. Now that would trigger a vote-a-rama, because you're going to allow one amendment, and if you're going to allow one, I think you need to have all these other ones that come in. I'm not sure exactly how this works. I've got to talk to more people, but I keep seeing different scenarios where there's a separate reconciliation bill, or that it's written into this reconciliation bill that has got the infrastructure. And if it has the infrastructure, that's a must pass.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the big question becomes, who in the House leadership, how does the House leadership behave in this situation?
Do they have the balls, for lack of a better word, to do this?
I mean, we'll see. I need to talk to more people to understand this mechanism. But
to me, that just doesn't seem like that's within the constitution of the Democratic Party leadership.
We will see. I mean, what first has to happen is that those who have committed to vote against the bipartisan bill must insist that they're going to do this, or to do it until the reconciliation is passed. Period. End of story. Don't book this burn. Losing to the Atlanta Falcons is the sporting equivalent of losing to a guy who campaigned from his basement.
I know people may want to trash talk me today. I just want you to know that this fundamentally hurts me and hurts my soul. So please don't. Thank you.
You'll appreciate this. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator, Emma, I feel your pain. I'm a Michigan alum, and I'm debating going to the game this year. Ohio State looks vulnerable. This time could be different. No, really. Totally won't be like the last decade. We're going to do this time, and I want to be there for it.
It was 9 sacks, by the way.
9 sacks.
Well, okay. How
do you do that? How do you do that when he can run like that?
between the 101 and the 5. Tapper's such a kiss-ass hall monitor. Leany, NYC, Emma, what needs to change with the Giants, aside from firing the GM who had never been hired?
Maybe don't punt from the 39-yard line. That's a good. I'm like, whatever. It's just I don't know. I don't know what to say.
They punted from
there. Yeah, they were in Atlanta territory.
What? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you take the field goal? Even if you don't think you're going to hit it.
They didn't trust Graham Gano to kick it. And Gano is one of the best field goal kickers in the league.
What? That's like a 52-yard?
Graham Gano is the vaccine.
Well, that'll be a 52-yard field goal?
What'd you say?
Gano is the vaccine of kickers. They don't trust him, even though they should have just.
Right.
Is that a 52 or like 54-yard? What would that be from the 30?
I don't know.
Plus 17, so yeah.
Oh, 17?
Yeah.
56 yards.
I mean, that's a long way to go.
That's in his range, for sure. He's hit field goals like that. He's a really good kicker. One of the top 10. Yeah, I mean.
Or you just go for it.
Or you just go for it when you have Daniel Jones, who's proven that he can run the ball really effectively. You have a variety of options. You have a first-round quarterback. You have a first-round left tackle who's actually playing well. You have a second overall pick on the running back. You have a first-round wide receiver.
I shouldn't have said anything.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it, honestly.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Here we go. 210.
Good afternoon, Sam and Emma. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. Long time no talk to. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I mean, it's a sad day. You mentioned DJ's passing, so I'm going to talk about her.
Okay.
Okay, so just like many others, I refer to Twitter as a hell site many times. But one of the best qualities about Twitter is that you can interact with people who have similar values and have a love for this show. And on Friday, I heard about the passing of EJ, who has the Twitter handle EJ, capital E, capital J, at capital NEGANS, capital KATT. And I'm going to read her Twitter bio, atheist in Heart Cathedrals, college grad, and ghetto AF, Wu-Tang and Cannibal Course. If you need me, I'll be over there just to the left of left, where hashtag left is best. She also had a couple of red roses there. I tweeted on Saturday morning, EJ was full of life and her sense of wonder was beautiful. She loved lefty politics and music. Many of us knew her from being mutual admirers of Majority FM, but we soon realized how kind she was. EJ loved fighting to build a better society, and she was very knowledgeable about politics. She was intelligent, funny, and a vibrant, empathetic soul. She loved promoting podcasts and YouTube shows from Majority Report callers and listeners. She loved to interact with her friends on Twitter, and they would often talk about what's going on with this show and other lefty shows. She especially loved Sam's libertarian debates, and she would re-listen to them for a good chuckle. It's hard to believe that such a unique and special person who brightened so many of her Twitter friends' days is gone. EJ is survived by her daughter, May Lynn, who's 20 years old, and her son, Logan, who is 17. EJ loved both of them very dearly. Condolences to her mother, Yvonne, who informed everyone on Twitter. And when Andrew Mathis, who is known as a longtime IMer under his pseudonym, Thames Darwin, had this wonderful exchange with Yvonne. Mathis stated, "I'm so sorry for your loss. EJ was a top-notch human. You did an amazing job bringing her up." And Yvonne responded, "EJ taught me to love our differences and embrace change." And Mathis said, "That's beautiful." EJ will be deeply missed by her many friends she has from the Majority Report community, and she will have a special place in our memories for many years to come.
Thank you, John.
Thanks
That's
so much.
very sweet.
Yeah, she was really one of the best. She was just so so lively and so full of life, like I said, and she just loved this show, and she would always defend you against anybody. I mean, all the people that always come to defend you against Dore and all the other crazies out there, and she was just always taking your side, pointing out how your arguments were all rooted in facts and love, and it's just she's a special person. I'm gonna miss her, and I know a lot of other people are gonna miss her also. So
hang in there, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for you and for
John.
her family, and I really appreciate you calling in, John, and telling us about her.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, man.
Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
I mean, one of the most gratifying aspects of doing this over the years has been the relationships that form around the show. I didn't know EJ, but there are people who develop very, very deep relationships with people around this show. And it's, Kyle wanted to do the Discord, and people were saying that, and, we haven't had some sort of central place for people in this show for a long time. This is one of the things that, made me interested in doing that, was just because I know that, like, on the old blog that we had, similar relationships were born, and obviously people have sort of like Twitter networks that they develop around the show, and then of course some people meet in real life too. But communication is real. Twitter may not be representative of the opinions outside of Twitter necessarily, but the connections that people make. YouTube chat, on Twitch, on Twitter or Facebook, or for that matter, or whatever it is, are real. They're real.
It is the beautiful thing about these kinds of networks, and it's, of course, we were talking about the antitrust stuff about social media on the show a lot, or the downsides, but the upside is that it brings people together, especially in a productive way, in a positive way that the show, I think, cultivates, and I'm proud of that too. And I know you must be immensely proud, since you've built this yourself with the help of other people. But that's I appreciate that call from John. That was beautiful.
Have you read my email? Where I live, the Corona passport went in use. Wouldn't you know it? The first night there were DDoS attacks and stuff like that. Many people couldn't go anywhere because of a couple of script kiddies with their mom's credit card. Weirdly, I was mostly angry at myself. I didn't foresee this very predictable fact so far for trusting government IT. Love you all, the community, especially the Discord community. Keep doing good work. Love you, from one of your European friends. Chantel, 4 years and counting today, Sam. Thank you for what you do every day. When the last caller talked about this show, I cried. Bless her soul, but I am sure you won't be getting such calls 1 year later. Let that sink in. Your voice is devolving. Don't bother reading this to the stream. Make sure you read this and go to bed, though. I'm not sure I follow that, but thank you. More IMs. Gupek. Take it easy, Emma, Lions fan here. You got nothing to discourage about. When losing an NFL record, field goal is normal and provokes no emotion. You can relate to the term embrace the suck. The sugar variant. I'm a mechanical engineer. I don't know if it's been brought up enough, but just because our schooling and training is in analyzing data and coming up with solutions, that doesn't mean we're not vulnerable to wild conspiracies and propping up capitalism. We take classes on money optimization and economics and push these lean principles that have caused our late-stage capitalist infrastructure to be so flimsy. I've also worked with multiple QAnon believers and 9/11 truthers. Just because you work in a respected field doesn't mean everybody in it's respectable. Casey answers, sorry, Emma, for your Giants. My Chiefs wouldn't hold on to the ball. At least Aaron Rodgers looks awesome again.
I feel sorry for you as a Chiefs fan. I really do.
Dixie Normus, Sam, I always find the interviews to be tremendously educational and well-rounded. Thanks to the whole crew for making them great. BJF Glued, what up, MR crew? There's been so much about this AOC present vote. I feel like there's more to this, and there would have been some consequences for her if she had voted no that we may not be privy to. I don't know. I mean, it's weird, like, to me, like someone like Jamal Bowman voted yes, not even present. Never mind, no.
Jamal Bowman is a good guy and a good representative. I mean, like, I think it's notable that it's both the New York representatives that.
All the New York representatives, but I don't know.
We may never know. I don't really. I mean, like, the fixation on this particular vote is probably more on progressive, in the progressive space, which I understand it, but it's like one of 400 separate, like, backroom deals, unknowns that we may not know in the course of this infrastructure fight. And so it's just going to be one of those things that we probably won't get an answer to, especially because AOC's statement, while she explained and, like, seemed genuinely heartbroken about it, did not really provide much clarity.
It further confused the issue, and I think that's the only I agree that AOC's on balance a good thing, but I think the only danger is when people have to twist themselves into pretzels to defend things that aren't really defensible. So I think it's not a defensible vote, and move on.
Right, and then you can also provide the context of saying she was also trying to block Boeing bomb sales to Israel. Like, there's that too. I as opposed to a vote that had no impact on the outcome.
This just in from Manu Raju at CNN, a tweet, a couple of them. Joe Manchin tells us push by Democratic leaders to get Thursday deal on reconciliation is a heavy lift. Right? Remember, they have pushed the bipartisan framework vote to Thursday. Push to get a deal on reconciliation before then. People were looking for, like, at least a top line number. He says there's a lot to do and people need to know what's in it. So it's going to take a while. Also says he's been speaking to Biden since they last met. And according to Raju, why Manchin's view is important. House progressives say they want a commitment from Manchin and Sinema on a framework of reconciliation in order to vote yes on the infrastructure bill Thursday. One progressive member told me there are more than 40 no votes without such a commitment. Now, this is important because, as I mentioned at the top of the show when we were talking about Gottheimer, it's irrelevant what those House members say. They could say they're going to vote for the reconciliation, but everybody knows that Nancy Pelosi is not going to put up a bill in the House that hasn't already at least been committed to by the Senate. So that means that Manchin and Sinema have all the leverage over what's in that reconciliation bill. It doesn't matter if Josh Gottheimer says, I'm going to vote for the reconciliation bill, because he could be signing off on a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, or he could be signing off on a $15 reconciliation bill.
It matters what's substantively in the reconciliation bill.
And that is a function of Manchin and Sinema as to what they're going to essentially allow. And if they're proxies for other people, then that too. But, and so it is good that at least, we'll see, that there are at least 40 votes that don't care about what happens in the House. We only care about what Manchin and Sinema say. And so that's the deal. Recursive snowflakery, aka Misfit Black Girl. It's worth putting up a map of Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, just to emphasize how close they all are. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Sam, not here, man. Sam's not here, man. Please consider watching this 2-minute video put out by Joe Rogan this afternoon. Explain why America is the best country to ever exist in the history of the world, of anywhere, of anything.
That was such a weird, like, rant he went on.
What is that up there? I've never seen it.
I don't know what this is about.
Oh, we played this on the show before.
Was this from Instagram?
Oh, I thought it was like an ad or something he cut. It's just him saying
No,
America's
it's just
great.
him like waxing poetically about how like America spurned innovation and how like unbelievable America. It was super, super odd.
Come shower with Crowder. I rewatched your super awkward flexathon, and it was funnier the second time. I think the newest iteration of the show is best when Emma is making fun of you. She is sharp, and I hope that dynamic escalates as time goes on.
Thank you for the green light.
I can see Emma like shaking your head, almost like with a tremendous amount of enthusiasm.
Yes, yes.
It's like Bradley when I said like, who wants that CBD infused CBD?
How was it, Bradley?
Infused fudge. It really does. When you eat it, it really does. Hey,
it tastes good too.
All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Mike from Portland.
Mike from Portland, what's on your mind?
A couple things, actually. The first being that I used to be an avid Joe Rogan listener, so I'm actually kind of happy you guys mentioned that. I would listen to him every day, driving an hour one way to school. And his podcasts were like 3 hours, so it worked out. Well, a coworker actually turned me on to you guys. So that was probably about a year and a half ago, right before the pandemic.
Nice.
And I started listening, I don't know, once a week. And then as things just got crazier, I just kept listening. You guys just made a lot of sense, especially compared to Joe Rogan. But
what was it that you liked about Joe Rogan?
Well, even before I started listening to you guys, I would listen to more of the science-related episodes. He had a lot of comedians on, and I started skipping those, I don't know, probably 3 years ago.
Gotcha.
It was just really repetitive. So I would listen to like the episodes where he had a sleep expert on or different health experts and stuff like that. He had some kooky geologist on once, or a couple times actually, which was funny to me because I was in grad school for geology at the time.
And did you and did you say like, well, wait a second, what I'm hearing does not necessarily comport with what I'm learning?
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Definitely.
See, did he have like a big white beard?
Yeah, if I remember, his name is Graham Hancock.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you think that the idea that he started talking about stuff that you knew about made you start to question the accuracy of what he was talking about?
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
And then obviously he would never look into the opposing view. He would just have this one guy on who says, everyone thinks I'm crazy in this field, but I'm right. And it's like, well, I should probably check out what someone else says.
Yeah, I think
everyone else thinks it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if somebody comes on, we have somebody come on the show and they say, people say that I'm mad, and but I'm not mad. They're the ones who are mad.
I have secret knowledge.
I would sort of say to the producers, hey guys, maybe we should just check out like who's saying he's mad or why. Yeah, that might be a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, fair enough. I mean, he's one of those that archaeology guy is or geology guy is one of those alien time travel or alien history guys or something like that.
No, it wasn't that necessarily. It was more. It actually was like science related. He was talking about like a certain element that was found in layers of the earth, and he thought that is what caused the end of the ice age, like one specific meteorological event
I see. And I just need to correct
that goes
you.
against all the Earth cycles.
Randall Carlson.
Yeah, I just need to.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, let me just and you can go on to your next point. We got to be quick, but I just wanted to flag you're saying that alien history, not science. So, but we can move on.
But did you notice that kind of through line though, really quickly, of Rogan seems attracted to bringing on people who believe they possess the secret knowledge, and it stretches across fields because it's like about finding hidden meaning in dominant narratives, like regardless of the substance of said narrative.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he would always kind of extrapolate to the extreme in, I think, every subject. I don't know if that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Sort of.
All right. So, what else you got for us? Anything else? We got to be quick.
Yeah. So, really quick, I was wondering, I know this is more sports related, but also very much labor and immigration related subject. But Qatar is holding the FIFA World Cup next year, and typically the event is held in the summer, which you'd think you wouldn't want to play soccer there in the summer, but they moved the entire event to November because it's so hot, and they're building air-conditioned stadiums for it. There's a lot of speculation about how they actually received or had their bid accepted.
Yeah.
Because FIFA is probably one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. They basically paid for a few of their conferences and probably just gave a bunch of money to the executives. But what's more important is over the last 10 years, almost 7,000 migrant workers have died building the stadium.
Oh, Jesus.
And they say that none of the deaths are out of the scope, I guess, of
what it takes to build a stadium,
regular construction deaths. And I just think it's ridiculous to think.
Well,
that,
you know what? This sounds like an interview that we're going to have with Dave Zirin at one point, who's written extensively
that'd be
about
great.
stuff. But appreciate the call. Thanks, man.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
I don't know. Should we check in on what's going on with Greg Abbott? The number 10, is that the one that we should do, or should we do 11? I think 10 is more relevant. This is good news on some level, I guess. I mean, in terms of the commitment that Greg Abbott is making. We have multiple lawsuits going on around the Texas abortion ban. Again, as a reminder, this ban is not one that is enforced by the state. It essentially deputizes people all around the country. You don't have to be from Texas, where you can sue anybody who in any way enables an abortion that takes place after 6 weeks from conception in Texas, marked by the fake thing of a fetal heartbeat. Incidentally, they peg it around 6 weeks. There's no fetus, and there's no heartbeat at that moment.
Yes.
You have an embryo that has electrical impulses that are that sound like a heartbeat when you translate them into sound.
And by the way,
which you need to translate into, because there's not enough going on in this embryo for there to be a heartbeat.
Before this law, 90% of the abortions performed in Texas were after this 6-week mark, because it's really difficult, one, to know you're pregnant by that time, and two, to get an appointment. And now that timeline's also truncated, that means that it'll be even less than that 10% of allowance. So it's nearly an entire ban, because you'd have to be like on it, and be able to find a clinic that can do it.
And the clinics are not going to be around because they're going to be afraid of, they're going to be afraid of getting...
They might be sued into existence because of that very bounty system, and the ones that are around will be so like handcuffed and non-functional and backlogged that you're not going to be able to get one.
So there's one doctor who's subject of 2 different lawsuits, one which is specifically to bring up the constitutionality of this. The other is from like some lunatic charlatan outside of state. The Department of Justice also suing the state of Texas over this law. Here is Governor Greg Abbott, whose numbers are tanking in Texas, trying on with Fox News' Chris Wallace, trying to address the fact that also, in addition to this being an abortion ban, there is no exceptions for threats to the life of the mother or in the case of rape.
Is it reasonable to say to somebody who was the victim of rape and might not understand that they are pregnant, until 6 weeks, well, don't worry about it because we're going to eliminate rape as a problem in the state of Texas?
Well, there's multiple things I have to say in answer to this, but the first thing, obviously, is that survivors of sexual assault, they deserve support, care, and compassion. And Texas is stepping up to make sure that we provide that by signing a law and creating in the governor's office a sexual assault survivors task force. But separately from that, Chris, I got to point out about the ways that I have fought to to arrest and apprehend and try to eliminate rape. I sought the death penalty.
But Governor, excuse me, because we are running out of time. There were more than 15,000 rapes in 2019 when you were governor. Let me just ask this question. A state representative, Republican state representative, says that he's going to offer a new measure that would restore the exception to the Texas abortion law for victims of rape and incest. If that came to your desk, will you sign it or not?
Well, we got to go back, Chris, to what the reason was why the law was passed in the first place. And the goal is to protect the lives of every child with a heartbeat. And so we're working to achieve that goal. Chris, I got to point this out,
including
Chris,
the child of a rape.
This goal is consistent with what the United States Supreme Court has written, and that is states have the ability to make sure that we protect the health and safety of both the mother and the child, and that's what we are seeking to do here. And I have to add this, and that is Texas just provided more than $100 million in funding for pregnancy centers across the state of Texas to help those who want to make sure that they will be able to carry a child.
Just to lock this down, are you saying, sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you saying that you will not sign an exception for rape and incest?
Well, first I got to tell you, Chris, you're making a hypothetical that it's not going to happen because that bill is not going to reach.
Oh, the hypothetical is that the bill's not going to reach my desk, as opposed to the hypothetical of like, we're going to get rid of rape.
Oh, but he created a task force.
We got a task force. We're going to step up on rape. We have a task force on the whole rape issue. So those 19,000, once the task force is deployed, I imagine we're going to see that number come down.
And don't worry, he put on a cape and he prosecuted some rapes, even though there were, what Chris Wallace pointed out, 15,000 documented rapes in the state of Texas at that point. But so maybe you're just not prosecuting hard enough, Greg.
The bottom line is the issue here should not be an exception for rape or incest in this instance, because we're talking about the sovereignty of women having sovereignty over their bodies. But they cannot maintain this position that an embryo with an electrical impulse is a child, a person. They can't maintain that illusion if they allow for exceptions here. They have to say that their argument is that every embryo with an electrical charge is one of God's children.
You know who might be one of God's children too is like perhaps the child that was raped and is now pregnant, or the children at the border who Greg Abbott has no care for whatsoever. It's fine if they're born into the world. But once they're born into the world,
you're on your own, buddy.
No, you're not just on your own. We're going to also oversee the human rights abuses of you and relish in it.
Right.
You're born, and I'll make sure that you suffer once you're born. Those are the politics of Greg Abbott and the Republican Party.
Who should we do next?
I say the Rubin or the Dare Kid.
We also
let's do this
Trump,
Dare Kid.
right?
I love this. There is a lot of evidence that masks work. They don't work 100%. Certainly, if you are vaccinated, they're going to work even better.
But if they don't work 100%, what's the point?
Yeah, that's why I don't wear a seatbelt. It doesn't work 100%.
Right.
That's why I jump off of buildings 10 floors up, because there's not a 100% chance I'm going to die. There's research that is from the CDC, and there's research that has been done from the Yale University School of Management that just came out this week, actually. But first, let's look at an anti-mask, anti-vax activist named Ethan Schmidt, who was so proud of himself, harassing a teenage DARE canvasser. And watch this exchange. This is awesome. I love seeing high school kids just tool on these morons. How old is Ethan Schmidt? Do we know?
Well, Ethan Schmidt is the anti-masker. I'm not sure exactly how old he is. Yeah, it looks like a mid-20s.
He's got a bit of Charlie Kirk syndrome.
Okay, yeah, here he is. He's Charlie Kirk going off. And the DARE is that, like, what is it? Don't.
It's like the cheesy don't do drugs thing. But good. The kid's heart's in the right place, and he's also about to
He's
school.
cool as hell.
Yeah, he's cool.
Watch this.
Oh, you triggered? You triggered? I'm not triggered. You're just an asshole. No, you can donate $50 and I'll let you go. Dude, anybody that wears a mask is a traitor to the United States. What the fuck are you talking about, bro? You're a traitor to freedom across the world. People are not comfortable talking to you if you don't have a mask on. It's my job. Look, kids get expelled from school if they don't wear masks. I don't give a shit. I'm not in school. That's tyranny, dude. They're abusing little kids. So you're enabling that, bro. Whatever, bro. How does it feel? How does it feel to be a tyrant, bro? Hey, bro, don't walk away. I need your name. You can either delete that video or you could donate $50. This guy's triggered because I filmed him. This guy's triggered because shut the fuck up, you little bitch. What are you gonna do about it? Nothing. I'm not about to assault you and go to jail. I got shit to lose, unlike you. You're out here with no job, just walking around recording people, bitch ass. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Fuck you. All right. So you gonna donate or are you gonna sign a release? You're the beta wearing a mask, dude. A beta wearing a mask? Yeah, betas wear masks. Bro, then why don't you put me in my place? I'm talking to you like an alpha. What you gonna do? If this was like 200 years ago, I would love to, bro, but... That's crazy, because it's 2021.
I just want to put that out.
He says he would have loved to assault that kid, but he can't.
200 years ago,
yeah.
I would have loved to. What are you
trying to go back to 1820?
So I can rock this teenager in the face.
Also, like... You're committing treason against America if you wear a mask? Like, what are you talking about?
Such
Go watch Glenn Beck, you
fucking
nerd.
It's such insanity. It's 1820. What is this dare?
You're doing tyranny against kids.
Dare?
If this was 1821, sir, I would take off my glove and challenge you to a duel.
Don't make me get down from my horse. I've been homesteading. This is, of course, this is in Arizona too, right? Like, so we're in like
it's like the OK
Pat
Corral.
Garrett and Billy the Kid situation.
Tombstone all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
Get Wyatt Earp out here to take this mask off.
All right, go back a little bit. I can't believe this is like a grown man actually making this argument. Like, it was 200 years ago, man. I would take you on. Oh, God.
I'm just walking around recording people, bitch ass. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Fuck you. All right. So you gonna donate or are you gonna sign a release? You're the beta wearing a mask, dude. A beta wearing a mask? Yeah, betas wear masks. Bro, then why don't you put me in my place? I'm talking to you like an alpha. What you gonna do? If this was like 200 years ago, I would love to, bro, but... That's crazy, because it's 2021, and you totally could, but you're not. You can't just fight people like on the street. You're a pussy. I wish we could, dude. Pussy. I really wish we could, but we can't do it. Pussy. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, keep wearing that mask. I will. Yeah. Stupid bitch. See ya.
Now, listen, as you know, I do not encourage this type of use of language. It's inappropriate. I think there's better words that we could use in this situation. However, that was pretty funny.
Bitch ass.
Effective, too.
Yeah, very effective. Very effective. Let's just go over some of this research about masks. Every time you cite research that shows that masks lower the incidence of pediatric COVID, Tucker Carlson sheds a tear or, stitches a sheet or something like that. I don't know what happens with him. This is from the CDC. Looked at pediatric case data for about 17% of U.S. counties and found that on average, pediatric cases rose after schools reopened. But counties without mask requirements saw larger increases, about 18 cases per 100,000 more than those with them. Among the counties the CDC studied, a majority, about 62%, did not have school mask mandates. So there is a clear...
surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it's, really shocking. Really shocking. Now, with that said, you probably also, just to be clear, if you don't have a mask mandate, you very well may have a lower incidence of vaccinations in your community, and so there may be more prominence in terms of the spread. So just to be clear on that.
Because both are probably likely, right?
I would imagine.
Yeah.
However, Jason Albalak, Laura Kwong, and a guy named Dr. Luby, I'm not sure if it's a woman or man, I can't see the first name, from the Berkeley School of Public Health, the others from Yale University and University of California. They did a research, which is, they say, is currently undergoing peer review. They conducted with 340,000 adults in 600 villages in Bangladesh, tested many different strategies to get people to wear masks. They couldn't get everyone to mask up. They were able to increase mask wearing by about 30 percentage points overall among adults who were encouraged to do so. This change led to a 9% reduction in COVID-19 overall. In communities who we promoted surgical mask use, COVID cases dropped by 11%. The effect of they were not measuring the effect of universal mask wearing because they couldn't do that. Right. This is the effect of voluntary mask program. It resulted in an increase to 4 in 10 people using a mask from 1 in 10 people. People over age 50 benefited the most, especially in communities where a surgical mask was distributed. In other words, a surgical mask is going to help you more than just a cloth mask. In these communities, COVID-19 cases fell by 23% for people aged 50 to 60 and by 35% for people over 60. Our study does not suggest that only older people need to wear masks, but rather that widespread community mask wearing reduces COVID-19 risk, especially for older people. Especially for older people. Their best estimate is that every 600 people who wear surgical masks in public areas prevent an average of 1 death per year, given recent death rates in the United States. They also tested the filtration of surgical masks that had been worn, crumpled up in pockets and purses, and washed with soap and water 10 times. Those masks still prevented more virus particles from passing through than typical cloth masks. So there's research about these masks. It helps. Does it completely stop the spread? No. Does it even stop the majority of the spread? Probably not.
But it stops a significant amount of the spread.
It's also the bare minimum that we should expect from people if we're going to force teachers to teach their kids.
Right.
Frankly.
I know, but like the entitlement, which washes over a certain portion of the population and is like aided and abetted by these media outlets, for that to happen, because public education is such an entrenched social program, people think now, oh, of course, like we can treat it, you know, treat these people who are public servants for granted. and it's just like it's a depressing dynamic.
Let's go to 336 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Yabba Dabba Doo, Yodel He Who from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang Beep Beep Boop.
All right. Very well. And what is on your mind?
I think I know that area.
Well, so go ahead and say first time, long time.
Of course, I recognize
this call.
the handle.
This call is, you're going to be upset with me.
Okay.
I'm going to say some things that you're not going to like. I'm going to say some things that, you'll like, whatever. I'm getting over a very, very bad case of COVID.
Oy.
Very bad. Lost 9 pounds in 3.5 days.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So, pretty rough. I got a big, big dose of COVID. Like, I know how I got it. I know.
How did you get it?
So I've been being very, very careful. I'm basically still living like it's, I don't know, June 2020. Like,
okay.
I don't really see many people.
Okay.
When I go out, I wear N95. If I am around people, it's like I haven't been around more than 2 people in a long time at a time. But
okay.
So basically, had somebody over for dinner. Expressed to this person how careful I was being. Let them, asked all the questions. It turned out that they had been having what they thought were allergies for about a week, and neglected to tell me about it. They spent the night, and I got a lot of COVID. A lot.
Okay.
So, I'm not vaccinated. We'll talk about that if you'll allow me to.
Okay.
And so I'll start by saying a couple weeks before I got COVID, which I contracted COVID on 17th of September. 2 weeks before that, I was in an emergency room for 16 hours for a different issue. It was basically like being in a scene from an apocalypse. It was terrible. It's just human suffering on full display all over the place.
Can you tell us where you're located? Just
region of the U.S. if you don't even want to say which state.
Yeah, I'll say. I just really don't like. You guys are gonna want to yell at me eventually. So.
All right. Well, that's fine. But we will yell at the state. But what state were you in?
Okay. It's Central North Carolina.
Okay. All right. So you were in the ICU. You were in the emergency room. It was a disaster. Was there a lot of COVID in there, or was it just like being in an emergency room is a difficult proposition?
Well, for sure, there were at least 4 COVID positive people in there. They had they had like a glass room built where they put people once you test positive or you have a positive test when you come in.
Okay.
They put you in this room. 3 of the people, when I got there, were already confirmed positive. They were in that room. There was one person that by the time I moved from the waiting room to, the emergency room itself or whatever, there's one other person that got confirmed positive.
Okay, but that's not where you got the COVID.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay. All right. So,
I will say, as far as the mask goes, I talked to a lot of people there and a lot of healthcare workers, and all of them said, even the one that I talked to that had COVID twice, all of them said that people none of them knew of any coworkers that had gotten COVID in the hospital because they're all wearing N95s.
Okay.
So, I know that it's still possible that you can get COVID with a mask, but
it's much harder. Well, it's much harder. I mean, it's much harder because you've got most of the people in there wearing it, so you're protected on both ends, at least, to a large extent. And but okay, so the N95.
Well, and one more thing about the emergency room. The only people there were 5 people in there that did not respect the masks. 5. One of them was a guy that was on a bed that they had wheeled out into the waiting room, who was screaming in agony for much of the time he was in there. And I guess he had bigger issues going on than me. He was just in a lot of pain. There was another person who's, from what I gathered, whose boyfriend had just been shot.
All right, well, listen, I don't want to, but we have limited time here, so I want you to get to the parts I'm not going to like.
The three people that did not respect the mask were the 3 COVID positive people. They were not respecting the mask.
Right.
Everybody else basically was respecting it. That's all I want to say.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now you've had COVID now for, you caught it on the 17th. You have, it took how long to incubate? And how long until you saw symptoms?
Well, when I went to get tested, they thought that I had the flu because it came on so quickly. But the reason I guess it came on so quickly is because I got so much of it.
Okay.
So I first came in contact with it Friday night around 8:30. Sunday, I really didn't feel great. I was supposed to go to my dad's. I didn't because I did not feel good. Good thing I did not.
Yep.
Monday, throughout the day, I was working. I worked from home. I was working, and just throughout the day, I was like, wow, something's really not good here. And then by 3-4 o'clock, I was thinking I should get tested. By 5 o'clock, I was trying to get tested. I got a positive Tuesday morning at 10 a.m.
Okay. And so, and it sounds like it's just been a nightmare for you. You've lost 9 pounds over the course of, since last week.
Yeah. And really that 9 pounds was gone from Monday night at 9:30 when I was going to eat, but couldn't, until Friday, maybe a little afternoon. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the part that I'm not going to like outside of like feeling bad for you? A, that you've got this, and B, that, I don't know what your reason for not getting vaccinated was. You want to tell us that?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you say a lot, and I know you're going to say, what else do you need to know? As Joe Biden said, what else do you need to know to make you get vaccinated? Well, I was being very careful. I was doing everything. There are people out there that are vaccinated that are much bigger risk to others than I am, or was, or whatever, have been. I just, don't feel like, and as you say constantly, there's a lot of unknowns with COVID itself, and people don't seem to understand that. There is unknown with the vaccine as well. And I kept trying to call you, actually, prior to getting COVID to have this conversation, and then I got COVID, which is hilarious.
Right. But, sort of better that you didn't. It feels like now. I mean, well, let's put it this way. Let's put the knowns about the vaccine that we know and the knowns that we know about COVID. We know the vaccines have not, it's conceivable to me that we've had a couple of people die from taking the vaccine. It's conceivable to me.
Right.
We know that there's been hundreds of thousands. In fact, there's no reason to limit it to just the United States, to 675,000 in this country, because the vaccinations have been taking place around the world. We're talking about a billion doses at this point, is it?
Mm-hmm.
So we have nothing even remotely close in terms of a death. We also know nothing remotely close in terms of illness like you're experiencing.
I understand.
We know that there is within a year and a half, we have data, or 2 years out in terms of long COVID, that things last from there. We know that there's no great incidence of adverse reaction. In fact, the other day we played a clip of Sam Harris, who said that maybe there was an argument about myocarditis in a certain cohort of boys. Young males, but it turns out, according to a New York Times paper, I should say piece from September 1, that that there is a myocarditis risk. There's a greater one with COVID of myocarditis. So, I mean, those are the knowns and unknowns that we know. We also know that there have been people who have been studying at least mRNA vaccines for a long time. And so it's conceivable that there's $6.1 billion vaccine, 6.1 billion vaccine doses worldwide. Now, different vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe tough to say. But, we're a year out from people taking the vaccine for the most part, maybe 9 months in this country. There's a lot of information out there in terms of its safety.
I understand. With that said, while the mRNA vaccines have been studied for a while, this particular whatever coating or whatever it's called with that spike protein has not been studied for as long.
Okay, and, but let me then ask you this.
Please. So I'm not saying that there is an issue with it. I don't know if there's an issue with it. I've read some things that there may be issues with. I don't know. Those things are immaterial to me. What is material to me is that long term, nobody knows. So I was being very, very careful. I ended up getting it. I ended up getting it the only way I was ever going to get it. So I guess what I wanted to call to say prior to getting COVID, which is still very important to me, is that if they want people to get vaccinated, if the goal is the highest possible vaccination rate, then, if you would hope to get as many people vaccinated as possible with consensually, right? You would prefer that to be how it happens. So with that in mind, and with the promise of the manufacturers that, to put the health of Americans, the health of recipients first, and to get as many people vaccinated as possible, it really bothers me that, the entire thing is being put on people, not the people that are, and I understand some people have very dumb reasons for not getting vaccinated. I understand all that. But the idea that it's all on them when the manufacturers will not forego the waiver of litigation or financial responsibility for their product, when they're out there telling people, this is safe, this is safe, this is safe. What else do you need to see? This is America.
What about the J&J, dude? Hold on. I'm sorry. You said the mRNA ones. Why not the Johnson?
I should also say, just mRNA has been used. I know for a fact that mRNA has been used in cancer treatments for a long time.
I'm not debating that mRNA has been used or not used for a long time. What I'm saying is that with this specific spike protein,
there's a different vaccine.
Has not been done for long.
But why didn't you take the J&J?
And honestly, at this point, I can't remember my reasoning for not taking it. But
all right, well, dude, listen. Hold on. No. Listen.
Not about the vaccine.
Listen. You're talking about the liability, and you're talking about. There's a couple of things that I'm gonna tell you now. The mandates are effective. more people are getting vaccinated. Okay?
Well,
and that's just a fact. That's just a fact. The other fact is, from a public policy perspective, you can't subject these companies to this type of litigation or they won't produce it.
Well, now give it to somebody that will.
No, that doesn't happen, dude. Go look at the Lyme disease. Go look at the Lyme vaccine.
All I'm saying.
No, wait. No. You're not time for you to listen. Listen.
Contradiction there.
There is a secret vaccine court where people go and they get remunerated if they have adverse reaction, because there is no vaccine that has ever been developed where people don't have adverse reactions. On Friday, after that segment with Andy Kindler, I went and I got a shingles vaccination. My arm is still, people can see the red lump on my arm. I know people who've gotten that thing and it knocked them out for 2 days. They wouldn't get the second one. There is no such thing as what you're talking about.
I'm not. You're acting like I'm saying that I want it to be 100% safe. That's not what I'm saying at all. I understand that there's always going to be issues with any drug, any food, anything like that. Somebody's going to have a bad reaction to it. That's not what I'm saying. And the fact that nobody's bringing this up, because I guess the idea is, well, they're never going to do it.
Bringing up what?
Okay.
What have you said that nobody...
That if they want people to feel confident taking the vaccine, they want people to feel confident in that, then they have to show that they themselves believe it to be safe.
Dude,
they are not willing,
it is not. They don't believe it is 100% safe, because nothing's 100% safe. So what is the payout?
So are you saying that?
What is the payout?
Are you saying that then is it safe enough that the billions that they've made off of it, that after, even if they forego the litigation waiver, is it safe enough that even if they forego that with the billions they've made off of it, that enough people are going to sue them that it's going to be a
what's the payoff?
Negative?
What's the payoff for, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, there's been 6.1 billion, I don't know, I mean, how many doses there have been of the specific vaccine that you have an issue with? But I don't know what the numbers that are breaking down. But I mean, the liability thing, you're not taking that. Have you never? Do you know there was no liability for the shingles vaccine? That's the exact same dynamic. Do you know every vaccine you've ever taken has the exact same dynamic? You know that, right?
Well, there's a vaccine court, right? But you can go to the vaccine court for the...
It's not part of our normal legal system. There's not part of our legal system. It's a completely...
But you can't go to it for COVID. You can't go to it for the COVID vaccine.
I don't know that it's been set up at this point for the COVID vaccine.
No.
But you're telling me that the reason why... Wait a second. You're telling me the reason why people will go and take every other vaccine, but not the COVID vaccine, is because they're not... They don't... Because the COVID vaccine hasn't been signed up in the secret vaccine court?
I'm not painting with that broad of a brush. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of people that are not vaccinated. There are a lot of people that are not vaccinated that would get vaccinated if they saw that signal come from the...
Send me a link to that data. Send me a link to that data, because you know what? I bet you, even in this audience, even though I've mentioned this court multiple times that's outside of our... They don't even know it exists, period. The number of people in this country who are aware that there is a vaccine court, I literally think could fit, maybe not in this office, but is so infinitesimally small relative to the number of people who have been unvaccinated. We are the least vaccinated country in the industrialized West. The least.
Okay. All that's all
Dude,
I'm saying.
You just got to accept you made a mistake.
I don't have to accept that because I don't know that yet. Now, it's very possible that
you just lost 9 pounds.
I don't know that yet.
In 3 days.
Yeah, I lost 9 pounds in 3 days. But if here in 4 or 5 years something pops up, people are more prone to other kinds of infections, something like that, something like, who knows? I don't know what it could be. I don't even want to get into what it could be.
I mean, don't you have these concerns about other medicines? Don't you have this concern about COVID? How do you not have this concern about COVID? We have data that shows that what it does.
I've been so careful. That's why I have been so
But it wasn't enough.
But dude, I got news for you.
It wasn't enough.
You weren't careful. You weren't.
I was careful.
No.
Yeah.
I got news for you. Not that careful.
I got news for you. You don't know. So
no, dude, listen. Dude, I know you hooked up with somebody who was not careful.
Exactly. Right. And I could have been more careful there, obviously, but I've been very, very careful. So now, what else do I want to say? Yeah. So real quick, with the hospitals filling up, absolutely 100%. That is an issue of people being unvaccinated. 100%. Not arguing against that. However, one thing that nobody's talking about that I figured out in what I've gone through is that another reason they're filling up is because if you're COVID positive, nobody will treat you. They send you to the emergency room. Now, maybe if you have a primary care doctor, which I don't, but if a doctor, this is just from what I experienced, if a doctor is the one that you test positive with, I don't know, maybe they'll treat you something, but I got tested rather at a independent site that's not necessarily attached to immediately being seen by a
And then you
doctor
call up the
there,
doctor
right?
and say, I've got COVID. I don't want to be treated. I mean, I want to be treated for my COVID. And the doctor says, you can't come into this building because we're afraid of getting COVID.
Well, not just that, but we won't even come out to even the doctors that I have seen in the past that know me and I'm not primary, or they're not my primary, they would not even come and deal with me on the phone or
Right. You got to go into a situation where they have protocols for dealing with somebody who has COVID. Now, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying, that the numbers in the hospitals, the reason why we're getting backed up is because people are afraid of getting COVID.
Well, it's not just that. It's because our system's complete trash. It's because,
Dude, listen. I'm sorry. Our rate of vaccination in this country is so abysmally low relative to other countries with far better healthcare systems. Now, it's possible that maybe in a country with a better healthcare system, you have developed enough relationships where people trust the vaccination protocols of the government. That's possible. There's really no way to really assess that, but it's possible. And I agree with you. Our healthcare system is garbage. But I got news for you. I've been working, I'm a doctor, and I've been on the front lines of COVID for a year and a half, and I'm watching this shit. And you call me up and say, I got COVID bad. And, I hooked up, but I thought she was safe or he was safe. And I didn't get vaccinated. Can I come in so you can treat me? You know what my response is? You got to be fucking kidding me. I got kids.
I'm sorry, your response is what? Oh,
you got to be kidding me. Well, I got kids and this and that. And we've had a vaccine out here for 9 months.
You're really putting some words in my mouth. I was not trying to enter into the building. I was trying to have a telehealth appointment, which they do. If I had tested positive with a doctor, they may have treated me telehealth. But if you don't test positive with the actual doctor, my experience was they tell you to go to the ER. It doesn't matter if you need to go to the ER or not.
Sounded like you needed to go to the ER.
No, this was after I'd had the antibodies.
Well,
right? This was after I'd had that. So I was much improved. I'm still a far way off from being back to anything like I was, but I was, not. My oxygen never got messed up. My biggest concern.
All right. Well, listen. Yes, you should. Someone should be seeing you on telehealth. No doubt about it.
Right.
I agree.
And
but
filling up.
But I mean, let me tell you something. Honestly, all these ancillary things, I honestly, I hope that you have no complications down the road. I hope that you get better soon. But I got to tell you, man, I think you are a good example of somebody who is like, has a position, and there is no amount of facts that is going to inhibit your position on this. You may be right. You may be right. Maybe it's not even the vaccine. Maybe it's, maybe it's my sports drink. Maybe it's LASIK surgery
like,
30 years from now.
You're talking to me like, have that I think they're 5Ging us or something like that.
But
That's
you know
not
what?
I think.
Honestly, dude, you sort of are.
No.
You're not coming up with what the 5G is, but you're telling me that it's possible 5 years from now, billions of people, or maybe just hundreds of millions of people. You're not saying millions, because if it was millions, you would just do the math and go like, oh, wait a second, millions have died of COVID already. So it's not millions. You're telling me that 5 years out, there's enough of a chance that tens of millions of people are going to die because of this vaccine, that it warrants not taking it now. That's what you're telling us. And I got to tell you, dude, that is a click away from the 5G.
Eventually.
Huh?
I fully intended on getting it eventually. I was just being very careful and waiting.
Well, I think you waited too long.
Yeah, maybe I did.
I mean, because you listen, there's a lot better chance that 5 years from now, we're going to be reading stories. Child incidences of child diabetes is up. Kidney failure is up. Autoimmune systems are broken. Neurological problems. With those numbers that I just mentioned, it's a lot more likely that we're going to see that as a fallout from COVID. That's just the facts. It's just an odds game, but we like double the number and they don't have hard data on this yet. All they know is that there's been double the reported incidence of child diabetes. And they're looking into it. Maybe it's a function of kids aren't going out as much, maybe because of lockdowns. But as they dig into this, they're starting to see like cells in the pancreas that have nothing to do with just sitting around. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I feel bad for you. I feel bad that you got COVID. I don't think you deserved COVID at all. And it does sound like you were trying to be cautious. And yes, I understand the dynamic of like, it's like everybody's living in their own private pandemic, and you have to, trust people, and you still want to go on with some elements of your life. But dude, I'm telling you, the speculation that you're talking about, that 5 years out, there's going to be this adverse reaction that is going to be greater than COVID, and it's going to have to be amongst millions of people. That's just a notch away from the 5G. You're just basically calling it, 5X. You don't know what it's going to be, but you think it's something, and there's no basis.
I don't think it's something. I think it's possible.
Yes,
it
is also possible that there's a meteor that comes in and knocks out more people.
Okay, well, I weighed that possibility against how careful I was being, and
you were wrong.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, no.
Not necessarily. I did get COVID, but I'm not necessarily wrong.
Well, listen, you know what? It's possible that by taking this phone call, going 7 minutes over, that my schedule gets pushed back 7 minutes, and I miss getting hit by a car. And you know what? You and I will never, ever be able to prove that that's not true.
Well, you're welcome.
And so all I can say is thank you, dude. Hang in there. I honestly hope that you recover quickly and that you have no after effects. But the chances of you having those after effects versus the chances of me having any after effects from the vaccine is greatly, greatly in favor of you having after effects. And I say that with the only reason why I say that is so that people can listening, understand that, because that is just simply every ounce of data that we have, every bit of medicine and knowledge from researchers that we have who have been working with mRNA technology for 20 years, epidemiologists and scientists, the overwhelming majority of them would agree with what the statement I just made. Hang in there, man. I appreciate the phone call. Email us and update us, okay? And let us know when you're feeling better.
I'll do it.
All right, thanks. All right, folks, we went way over, obviously. I did not anticipate that. I feel horrible for the guy. I feel absolutely horrible for the guy. And like I say, I understand sort of the knee-jerk hesitancy that people who, for other reasons, like I understand like a fear of going in an airplane.
Well, there's a media industry stoking this guy's anxiety.
But there is a massive industry stoking this anxiety. And they're making a ton of money off it. I don't care if it's like Brett Weinstein or it's Tucker Carlson or whatnot.
And sometimes it's just anxiety.
Well, there's anxiety exists, and then to get
useful
the
no, look, and I know, but I mean, if he's listening, like, look, I understand being anxious about this, and like I'm not diagnosed. Like, anxiety can be placed in a variety of different ways, and sometimes you just got to take a step back and weigh the proportionality of the anxiety.
And you know what? If it's anxiety, then you own up to it being anxiety.
I know,
like,
but
I'm
that's
afraid
hard
to.
sometimes.
I know. I understand that's very hard. But like, maybe like you're afraid of flying. On some level, you got to know that it's irrational in terms of just sheer numbers. But yes, people are afraid of flying, so they avoid getting on an airplane. But when you try and rationalize it, to say like, I'm afraid to get on an airplane, even though I drove here in a car. When you try and rationalize it like that, then you're kidding yourself, and and particularly if there's a situation where, like, I don't know, the only way to escape this huge forest fire is for everybody to get in this airplane, and you're going like, I don't know. Then it becomes a problem for other people. Now, it doesn't sound like this guy is, going out there and doing that. I mean, and he clearly took COVID seriously.
But even when you take it seriously, you can be one decision away from infecting your dad.
You just don't know. It's so hard. Exactly. If that kicks in, if those symptoms kick in 5 hours later, his father could have been, who knows? And I mean, it's, I definitely understand, I understand all of it. I go through it. I got 2 kids. I got, I have an ex-wife. Like, we all, like, everything's got to be negotiated. Everybody's living in their own private pandemic. It's hard.
No,
it's hard. But there is 2 things that you can do that have definitive value. Mask in as many situations as you can. Be vaccinated. All right, folks. Let's. I'm just going to go through. I got 10 IMs, and I feel horrible for that guy. I really do. And I.
Look, I feel horrible. I know people like this in my own life. A little more, like, very anxious about this. Sometimes anxious more so about other things. And, like, it's not rational. That's all I got to say. And I feel for you. I love people, who also suffer from some of that stuff. And I get it. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry you're going through that.
And, I wish we had been more convincing about the vaccines. It really makes me feel bad that there are people who listen to the show that we didn't do enough of a job in convincing about I mean, everything's a risk. Like I say, I could, that phone call could have saved my life because I'm not going to get hit by a truck. Or I could get hit by a truck and maybe it's that phone call's life. I mean, both those possibilities exist. Impossible to measure. Right now, we have facts.
Tune in tomorrow to see if Sam shows up tomorrow.
We'll see. We'll see. But right now, we do have a set of facts. And, we have a set of facts. And I can assure you that all of those people who work in those pharmaceutical companies, they've all taken the vaccine.
The rationality is not based on facts. I mean, this is just our brains are can convince us that we're being rational when we're really just trying to rationalize our anxiety, right? But the reason it was revealing when he said, "I don't know why" about the Johnson & Johnson.
Right.
Sam Floby. It's so funny watching the doorknobs all at once, either denying they were ever Tulsi stands or saying they were wrong all along about her. Some going as far to claim on Twitter that Tulsi is worse than Tucker. Cue circus music. Frida Nips. What's this about the corporate Dems now trying to whip House Republicans to vote for the bipartisan bill in an effort to kill the reconciliation? They're trying, but I don't think it's going to work.
That was my fear all along.
Yep.
But I agree with Sam. I don't think it's going to work.
It might, but I doubt it. Scooney, only just watched Thursday's show, but AMN Animation has to create a video about Crowder's Montreal mugging story. Oh, you should also see he created an amazing video about
who did?
Eamon about.
Oh, Eamon did. I saw a screenshot. I was tagged in
about reaching the goal.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. We'll play it. We'll play it.
No way.
All right, Josh from Tucson. Joe Rogan is obviously looking clickbait material in all he does, even with the latest ivermectin BS. Michael Tracy's delightful girlfriend tried watching the Binder-Tracy debate this weekend. Took me 4 minutes to get sick and tired of Michael Tracy. Now I understand why Sam went off on him during their debate. Animal Psyche, my great uncle passed from COVID. His wife was anti-vax and he was hesitant. He decided to get it and not tell her, but he contracted it before he could. People are getting too paranoid about the supposed adverse vaccine effects. Have there historically been super long-term effects from vaccines? I think we would have heard by now. There have not. Not that I'm aware of. And even when you talk about, didn't we have somebody on to talk about the formaldehyde babies? Where was that? Thelamine. Did we have someone call in, or do we interview? They made the point that was not even FDA approved. That was all off-label usage that people had imported from Europe. Nobody's more skeptical about pharmaceutical companies and their their willingness, their hunger for profit than I am. But I'm telling you, in this instance, the house is on fire. The house is on fire. And you're speculating as to well, what if we put the house out and there's an earthquake here in 5 or 10 years? Then we could die in that earthquake. Maybe it's better that the house burns down, we move, and then we're safe from the possible earthquake that hits. Webstatic. I read that 80% of the Arizona Domes voted Dems to a resolution to give a vote of no confidence to Sinema if she tanks the recon bill. What does that mean? It means that she's going to have a very hard time winning a Democratic primary if she does this. And I got news for you. I don't know if there's a radical makeover that she can get that is going to make her palatable to a Republican primary. Chris Burdick. Now, maybe she just goes and cashes it out, but I don't know who's going to talk to her at that point. When Emma mentioned we need to talk about Kevin, I could see in your face that you were trying to remember if that was the name of a sitcom you auditioned for. Jay Shivone. I did okay with the first Shingrix shot, but I had to take the day off from work when I took the second dose. Oh, gosh.
The first what shot?
Shingles. Mark Monkey.
That was one for the ages.
Rest in the power metal, EJ. Thanks for always checking in on me and my wife. I never got to tell her how much that meant to our small family in Flint.
Oh, my God.
Train boy, Jamal Bowman has always been horrible on Palestine. Look at some of the things he was saying in his primary.
I did not know that. Okay, thank you for I will look into that.
Bear at home, me too. Sam hates freedom. Why would you want to keep people from becoming COVID factories? Make COVID great again. Over 6 billion doses so far. That call had no idea. Carrot and stick is effective, but it's more stick time. Maybe anti-vaxxers can replace the libertarian debates. And wish folks could hold on to others in this standard, car companies, food producers, real estate developers. LOL Emma. LOL Emma. Oh. All right. It's a mean Giants thing. I'm not going to read it.
Just read it.
Algene enthusiast. I got it already. I didn't understand any of it. The caller's argument makes no sense for many reasons. Among this is his concern about the spike protein, which he coincidentally got a large dose of when he got COVID. Traditional vaccines use dead or weakened viruses, which would also include the viral spike protein. On mRNA, your body is constantly producing and degrading mRNA. The average half-life of a human mRNA is 10 hours. Two more. Vutash. The situation in Qatar is pretty bad still, with workers under forced labor contracts and unbelievable. MigrantRights.org has been doing a good job monitoring the situation. Malcolm Bidal, blogger, Frontline Defenders, has been doing great reporting on the subject too. Maybe we'll look into that as we get closer. And the final I am of the day. Matt from New Jersey. I knew what the FISA court is. I had no idea there was a vaccine court.
Huh.
Bradley?
Oh, Matt? I thought that was a Pfizer pun, but yes, FISA too.
Yeah.
You could.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
It could have been, right?
Emma, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my